And it was to, like I said, it was to the tune of $400,000. Well, since then, we've been talking with CDBG and USDA, and they have reviewed the letters and the rationale for the underestimation. When the contractors finally bid on it, it was going to cost us about $400,000 more than what we had, than the McCrones had estimated. They has USDA and has looked it over, and they're convinced that there's legitimate reasons for these differences in cost. USDA has agreed to give us $325,000 more money for this project.
When you say give grant money?
$225,000 will be grant, and another $100,000 will be added to the loan portion. Now, they have, and these different groups talk back and forth. I've been asked to prepare a letter, Mayor, for your signature to Mr. James Castle from CDBG. There is a good chance that they will give us an additional $75,000 in grant. So the $400,000 in additional funds that is needed for the project, $300,000 of it will be grant money, and $100,000 low interest loan over 40 years, which brings the total to $360,000 in loan and
Grant.
no, over $1 million,
You
over $1
combined
million in
265.
grant money. It was $260,000 in the beginning for loan, and they're adding another $100,000 to the loan. It'd be $360,000 in loan, and the rest of it will all be grant money to total $1.6 million.
$1.6 million.
That's what the total project is. The total project is $1.6 million. And all of that will be grant money except $360,000.
That'll be loan.
That'll be a loan over the course, strung out over a course of 40 years, paid back over 40 years at about some of it's 2.5% interest, and some of it's 2.15% interest.
Ryan and Dan might still be here.
What was that, Rodney?
The $360,000 that we're gonna be paying back over 40 years,
Right.
a portion of that
94.
is at 2.15% interest, and there's a portion of that which is 2.5% interest. I don't know. I got the breakdown. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's anywhere from 2.15% to 2.5% interest over 40 years for $360,000.
So are they, Ronnie, are they going to be taking the, if we've got currently the loan as we know for 260, and you said there's going to be a need to
Increase it
borrow
by
another 100,000, is that going to be a second loan that we'll have, or would that?
I think they're gonna do it in 2 separate loans.
Okay. But
But they're gonna try to close on the bonds all at the same time.
okay. So then well, we know we've got the one loan for 2.1%, and then you're saying this other loan could be maybe 2.5.
A portion of it is. I'm not exactly sure how much of it, but it's not to exceed, none of it exceeds 1.5. Now, this letter, Mayor, is to Mr. James Castle. Is expecting it, and it basically reads, the town of Rock Hall has been approved for funding from the USDA and the CDBG for the water plant clarifier. In receiving the bids to perform the work for the project, we have found that the estimated cost originally calculated is short by $400,000. The town of Rock Hall is requesting the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development approve an additional $75,000 in funds to be added to our CDBG for the water plant clarifier, contingent upon the USDA funding the remaining balance needed. USDA has informed us that we will receive an additional $100,000 in the form of a loan and an additional $225,000 in grant funding. This leaves a remaining balance of $75,000 needed to allow us to continue with the water plant clarifier project. We've enclosed a letter received from McCrone that further defines and explains the overrun the town is incurring. Please contact the town manager with any questions or concerns. This is a request for that. Now, if they come back and say, we're not gonna give you 75, or we'll give you 50 or whatever, USDA is gonna make up that difference. So the funding is in place, and that is the last piece of it.
It's needed and better
You
now.
know,
No, I mean.
and this additional $400,000, that's 75% grant and 25% loan, and it don't get much better than that.
Don't get
And this is Brian's letter from the
And
27th.
I put Ryan's letter of explanation, attached it to, I'm gonna attach it to that letter so they can read for themselves.
Okay.
USDA said they think he done a very good job in explaining the situation, and they're solid behind him, and
Okay.
they hope that does it for CDBG.
Okay,
as
I
well.
mean, I look at what's been explained out, I mean, there's been a $400,000 shortfall, and there then is the need we've known for that amount of money to make up the difference to go forward with this project. We've got another sizable amount of grant money applied. We've got now a portion of what is the difference that's going to be through a loan at a low interest rate over 40 years. Let me just, Ronnie, take this home tonight, I'll come up and see you in the morning. And I'll sign this and give this to you.
You can just drop it off at the, if you just, once you sign it, you drop it off at the office, and they know what to do with it.
All right, that's fine.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
But out of a $1.6 million project,
Okay.
1
Make sure he gets
$1
in.
million, 240,000 is,
You're gonna say that word.
Yep, I'll be up in the morning.
Playing the games with it.
Yep.
I have a question. I don't mean to go backwards, but I was here when the gentleman from Macron was here explaining the overrun for over $1 million project. And I just felt that I couldn't comprehend a lot of what he was saying as being very realistic. And I was wondering, who wrote the RFP to Macron, who did the engineering work? Didn't we hire them to do pre-engineering work to identify what we needed before we determined what we needed on an RFP for the actual work that was being quoted? Didn't Macron do a pre-engineering survey? Didn't they spend a lot of time in our plant to determine exactly what it is we need?
yes.
Do you remember how much that was for?
I don't know, it's part of their whole engineering.
But there was a fee
cost.
for that. There was a
Yeah,
specific
it's
fee.
built into their fee, but I don't know what percentage of that it is.
Well, I don't understand if you wrote an RFP and they came in and did an engineering survey, and I'm only speaking from my own personal engineering experience, how that mistake could have possibly occurred. If they did their job, and if we're paying them that money to do that pre-engineering survey, I would certainly be all over them for a rebate.
Well, all I can tell you, if you'd like to, his letter is pretty explanatory, if you'd like to read.
I'd like
a
to see the
copy of it.
RFP, because if he complied
Well,
with
the
our
RFP,
RFP, if he complied with our RFP, and we agreed on what he decided and determined was the technical aspects and physical requirements of what we need for our clarifier system, and he went out and he was in charge of writing the RFP for the clarifier system. I'm saying he, meaning Macron. And then Macron spoke with all these vendors based on the RFP that was developed with money that we paid him to do an engineering study. I would say that there is some sort of a mishap there, and the town of Rock Hall should get some sort of a rebate for services. I mean, an overrun of $400,000 on a $1.2 million project is outstanding. It's not a minor error, it is outstanding. That's only my take on it. I heard the gentleman when he spoke, and I totally disagree. This is not a $10,000 plumbing job. I totally disagree with the fact that people are running up in their trucks, filling in numbers on pieces of paper for a $1.2 million project. You sit down and study that. You sit down and balance that. You put fudge money in there, and then you give the quote out. This is not something that's done on the fly. I just can't possibly comprehend that. I'm so sorry. But then again, I've never had a $400,000 overrun on anything I did. And I've never gone back to a client and asked them for more money. Thank you.
Well, I would just say that probably the time to have raised those questions were when he was sitting here, so he could have answered them instead of one of us trying to do it, because I'm certainly not in a position.
Well, I was
to
waiting
answer
for
it.
someone to ask a question. No one did. The only person that asked a question was Chip. I feel as though, I'm in the audience here, but I just have given that a considerable amount of thought, and it just absolutely blows my mind.
But to be clear, the additional 400,000 is not to Macrone.
I understand that.
As I understood, were some design changes throughout the process, and
The project grew
So-
after he started.
Well-
work.
I mean, this is
That's-
added cost to make these improvements that the town needs.
Yes, I understand. I heard every word he said. And he said they forgot to quote the aerator. Everyone forgot to quote the aerator?
No, he didn't forget to quote it. It was not in the project.
So who
But
didn't
the
put it in
original
there?
design-
It was not in the original
Right.
project.
The
But
town
after they
decided-
got inspecting it and they found troubles with it,
Mhm.
then it was added to the project.
Mhm. So is it on the RFP?
No, it was not mentioned in the RFP.
But I thought most of the cost of the 400,000 was
That's
on
not what I
administrative
understood.
because they had to stretch the time out further.
Well, that was
Not
a big-
all of it, no.
The
Not all of
majority,
it.
the
No.
majority of the cost.
A huge amount of it.
Part of it,
38,000
part of
was
it
for the
was that they had to,
administrative
part of it was that USDA, who is the funding agent for the vast majority of it, said, you can't get this project done in 9 weeks. It's gonna take we think you should take 11 or 12 weeks. When Macrone sees that, they think that means, and it does, that they have to have an inspector on the job for 2 or 3 months longer than they thought they were gonna have to. And when they have to put an inspector on the job, they have to figure on paying the inspector. That was the increase in some of theirs. It wasn't brought on by Macrone, it was brought on by USDA, who was the funding agent, that said, this is the time we're gonna give the contractors to do it. The aerator was an additional piece of the project that was that was found to be faulty after the RFP went out and after the majority of the design had been done. So all I can say is USDA, who is the funding agent and who has give us $1.25 million in grant, they have read that letter and they agree they agree with it totally.
Well, that's what I was saying, the majority of it, not the majority, but a lot of it was coming from administrative fees because they had to move the time frame.
That was a piece of it, absolutely.
When
Which
did-
should have been thought about.
It
when
should have
did
been
the
covered in the
USDA
original
say
sorry.
that
All the contingencies,
there was
even by
more,
paint and
more.
Breaker
more
box.
They didn't know they
more
needed an
generator.
In a letter to Macrone.
Didn't they look at the aerator?
Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry.
I think it was, I read it, I think it was in a letter to Macrone. USDA is the one that told them that they had to give 11 or 12 weeks instead of 9. They thought that was cutting it too short and wasn't being fair to the contractor. Was forcing them to get it done too
Right.
quick.
When did that, was that, I assume, when did they announce that? After we had already bid at that point? Or when we put the bids out?
After we received the bids.
Okay. The aerator that Susan or Kate mentioned, now didn't we
That was in
vote on that in June, I thought?
Look, I'm gonna stop right here because I'm gonna say the same thing again.
What's wrong?
To ask the questions of me, when you had Macrone sitting right here before you, and his letter explaining this process was the time to ask the questions. I'm not the engineer, and I think if you have questions, they should be referred to McCrone.
Well,
Because that's his job.
Right, and that's why actually when I emailed my topics for the agenda, I included Ryan in the email in the event that there was anything that was, you know, that he wanted to input on it, as we did a discussion tonight on the clarifier. But I guess, Ryan, the only thing I'm just saying is, I mean, it's not like we have one shot to ask. I mean, if we wanna come back around.
You can ask him anytime you want, but to expect me to be able to answer those technical engineering questions, I think is a little
Well,
unfair,
let me ask-
because I'm not the
No,
engineer.
listen, let's view this as you being the conduit. Could you in turn follow up with him on the front ends and the front end? of
If
the
you
project?
have some specific questions, and pass them to me, I'll be glad to send them to him.
Well, I mean, I think what I'm hearing from the audience is I've got a couple calls from that. I think you and I both got a call from Ms. Agnes, because she was saying that, you know, she thought that was a little bit of an increase. And, you know, you hear this and you want to go back and review the paperwork outside of when that man is here, because it, you know, you do get questions after that. And, again, I guess my follow-up is, as Susan was pointing out, which was, when did the USDA tell McCrone then there was going to be an additional days to do the job? Were there front ends that were put out to either the USDA or to the CBDG? And I guess just the general comment to McCrone is, all I have is, again, it is concerning, or I guess, you know, disturbing to know that there was 400,000. Now, with that said, don't get me wrong, we did get a handsome amount from the USDA and potentially from the CBDG. I get all that, but I think these are legitimate questions that are being raised by audience and council members.
If you put them in, if you'll give me those questions, I'll pass them on to McCrone and let him answer.
Okay, all right, good enough.
But I think we're very privileged as a municipality to get the grant money and support from.
Well, considering that when we heard from,
CBD, you look at some of the other projects going on in the county, which have been in the newspaper,
well, we were at the COG meeting and Brian, or who was it, Don Offerson had,
Galena.
Yeah, he had-
$340,000 project and got $20-some-thousand grant. That's it. You got loans for the other two.
I can tell you what, I've never seen a project go out of that size with that much grant money involved in it. So, I'm not saying, I'm not saying you don't ask questions, but that, we're very, very lucky in what we got for that project.
okay. Any other questions? Audience, any other questions? All right, next then is the wastewater treatment plant. I put that on there, Ronnie, because I was dropping some limbs and stuff off at the brush pile this weekend, and I had seen Denny going back and forth. Sunday I ran into Timmy and I asked him, was everything okay at the plant? And he said that the diffusers in the digester were a problem.
They have to be replaced. Every once in a while, the diffusers are the things in the bottom of the digester where the air comes up through it. And the one digester just needs to be, his drain in it, so we can replace them. We already have them. It's just overdue. Some of them get stopped up over years, and he's pumping that one digester down so we can replace the diffusers. And we've had them for several years, really.
And now it's just a matter of.
Sunday.
Yeah, I haven't seen Denny yet to run up with him. I will, because he was busy when
I
I
was
was up.
talking to Timmy on Sunday because I was up there looking at the brush pile. Somebody put some pallets in there.
Yeah, Raymond said there's a lot of things up there that's not.
But I took care of it. Charles, we got the pallets, they got those
Good.
taken care of, but there's a couple of you, I haven't brought that out to shop rags yet.
Right.
I might save that for the next
Right.
meeting, but.
All right, so.
Now, just while you're on that
Right.
wastewater treatment plant, we are in the midst of getting ready to have our sludge removed. Then we had to send the tests away. We're waiting on test results, and the reason we want to get it moved now is because the state of Maryland passed some laws here last year where you can only land apply this sludge this time of the year. Obviously, we know you can't apply sludge in the summertime when you have crops on the fields, because trucks can't get out there, and they have passed a law where you can't apply it anymore, land apply it in the wintertime, because I guess they feel the ground's frozen, it doesn't absorb it, you get a lot of runoff. So there's a very small window of time that you have to haul this sludge, and you gotta keep in mind that everybody else has got the same window. And what that amounts to is what we don't get hauled out. I'm sorry.
I think it's gotta be dry too, we have a lot of wet, rainy weather.
Yes, and that's not gonna help either. But when you, if you can't get it land applied, then you have to take it to a landfill and get rid of it.